Recording is on.
Hello, today is Sunday, the 12th of June 22. This is our Desiderata Extinctionati meeting. I can't remember the number, whether it's 103 or 104, I'm not sure. And we were thinking that we would, 113. 113 or 103? Anyway, the topic was agency or not for humans, and maybe continue on the subject of consciousness that we touched last week, and anthropocentric view of the world. So maybe who wants to start?
I'll just put a little thing out there and see if anyone's interested in it, which is that I think we come across this question of human agency out of the fact that human beings feel separate from the world in which they live, and separate from each other. There's a disconnect. There's nature in one place and human beings in another place. So, for instance, agency. I guess you could argue that in a way, agency also implies will and power to manipulate circumstances, you get these questions. Do human beings have free will? Which is closely related, I guess, to the question of what degree of agency do we have. I wonder whether instead of actually talking about whether we have agency, we're better examining what would we say, because we're talking from a point of disconnection. What would we say if we felt a genuine connection with the natural world and the environment in which we live? Because my observation in saying this is that I feel as though if we re-established our connection, we wouldn't feel the need to ask the question about agency in the first place. It just wouldn't arise, because what we wanted would be one and the same thing with what everything else wanted. There wouldn't be, you would sort of be moving with the river rather than standing on the bank on one side of it trying to manage it and get it to obey your instructions and go where you want it to go. You're actually part of the way it's going. And if you're part of everything, everything's going the way you want it to go anyway. What you want is the same as what it wants, so to speak. So I don't know if that might start anyone off if they want to. Make a further comment.
Actually, it's funny. Like it's like what you're saying. It's all the roads lead to Rome. We're always going back to the alien cortex again, because we're always going back to the disconnect. And before we start on that, I just wanted to thank DB very much for posting the thing on the talk on William Blake, the comments on his poetry, because that is exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? Because it was really, really very well made on the sub there. I don't know if any other ones, but it talks about this too. But yes, Gary, yes, it would be nice to explore it as if we felt a connection. But lots of us in this group, I mean, it would be nice to hear how we how do we feel in this connection? How, for example, for me, when I got aware of what was happening at a very young age in the world, it was not something I could put in words. It was something that I felt in my body, as if I was being hurt when I was seeing at a very young age a lot of lights everywhere and going up in the countryside, and also I could feel the rivers sick and animals going away. I mean, that is just I'm just bringing out sensations more than, and it evolved into other things when my intellectual education was made, and I started to understand the connections with human activities. But that's how, I mean, for me, from a point of view as a woman, and also a child that I was, it was a pain. It was something very, very painful. Um,
So you're saying you're feeling the pain of the natural world being endangered, is that what you mean?
yeah, it's like you feel a disease that's getting at you, and you feel that even the death. You feel like you're losing every day somebody of your family.
Yeah. I used to feel that back in the bygone days, um, when I used to listen to Sam Mitchell give his talks. I think every Friday he reserved his Friday talk for a reading from a website called Monga Bay. And Monga Bay is basically a litany of outrages against the natural environment. You know, how many elephants were killed for their tusks this week, and how many million acres of the Amazon were burnt during the week. And um, you've just reminded me of that, because I actually couldn't listen to that talk that he gave on Fridays, because the pain of listening to it, of the description of what was happening, was just too much. Um, it wasn't a case of hiding my head in the sand, and pretending that it's not going on. It was simply a case of just having to listen to somebody describe what was happening. It was just altogether too much. I remember distinctly there was one episode. I think that was probably the one that completely finished me off forever, and I never went back. Was where I don't know where it was. Somewhere in Southeast Asia. I'm not sure where they tried to get rid of feral pigs, possibly these damaged crops. I don't know what they did, by putting bait which has got explosives in it. Except that what was happening was the elephants were eating the bait, the explosive bait, and getting their mouths blown out. And, I mean, it's a bit hard to take, you know. I know, I suppose it's an extreme point, but I'm just doing it to sort of illustrate what happens when you start to tune into the pain of the natural world. If you do feel some connection to it, and you're exposed to that kind of thing, it's very difficult to cope with. DB, did you want to say something about the Blake? Because I didn't. I haven't followed up anything on Reddit the last few days. Is there anything you feel that you can say about what was posted there? Oh, okay. You can't talk. Fair enough. Yep. Yep. Okay. That's all right. Anybody else follow up the Blake?
Yes, or else anybody else who could share a little bit what they mean by if they can um, how do we feel when we look at the world from the point of view of our connection in the subject of human agency, because it's a for me it's very difficult to see this clearly. I'd really like to have some kind of, because it's again a thing that's very to do with the senses, and not language, for me personally. But maybe some other people here have another another take on this.
Yeah, I guess I can give it a try. But I first wanted to respond to what Gary was saying about the Mongo Bay, the Sam
Monga
Mitchell's.
Bay, Monga
Yeah,
Bay.
yeah,
Thank
yeah, yeah.
you.
Because I listened to Sam read those for many many years, coming up to a decade almost now, and I think it has um, it has a purpose because to me it's a little different from what you just described because I could never be bothered to read those things every week or even every month, but having it on your headphones, like when you go for a walk or something, with a weekly summary, like he makes for your ears, that is totally possible for me to take in. But like you said, I could never bring myself to sit and read it. If you understand what I'm saying, because if I read it, then I'm only doing that. But if I'm
Yeah,
going for a walk along the beach and listening to it, then I can I can choose. I can listen to it, but I can shut it out if I want, or I can kind of laugh within myself to the Sam Mitchell's commentary to it. You have all kinds of uh, ways that you can put some kind of distance between yourself and the stuff. But I think my most important point about those Manga Bay weekly podcasts from Sam is that they keep you informed, sort of, no matter what you may imagine in your own life or in your feelings, and what you'd sort of feel that you need to say to yourself, to tell yourself in order to carry on. This Manga Bay roundup kind of puts everything in place again and tells you that yes, Indonesia is fucked. South of Saharan Africa is fucked. The Americas are fucked. Europe is fucked. The Arctic is fucked, and the Antarctica is also fucked. He doesn't say it like that, but that's kind of the conclusions that you will have to draw after listening to 50 Manga Bay weekly roundup in a year. So I think that is kind of good because politicians and IPCC reports and meetings and stuff, they sort of always try to give this upbeat. We are finally getting control of the destruction and the climate problem. Everything is within reach. Uh, that's kind of the PR message. So I think Manga Bay is a very good counter message to that, and it's also very well sourced and researched and stuff. Yeah, so I totally get the emotional wish to just shut it out. I'm probably a bit more hardcore than you, Gary. So I've been around for this kind of stuff for more decades, so I can take it. But I would never read it because reading is just too much. Too much just doing this thing for half an hour or something. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. Go
There
ahead.
was a couple of things. Um, yeah. Sure. Definitely, I'm affected deeply by that kind of thing. And I just wonder, though. Uh, I think even Sam commented there at one stage. He said, okay, that Monga Bay is just doing this on and on and on and on, all this nature destruction porn, and well, basically, it isn't having any effect. It's not really going to, not in the way it would need to. If it was going to, it would have by now. And then the next, I guess, the next thought is, well, what does it take to cause human beings to alter their course? And because it needs to be a collective action, is it possible at all? I mean, it looks at this stage as though it's not. There's no sign. And in any event, as people in who are informed will tell you, of course, it's probably 50 years too late. But yeah, sure, it's an important. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, but I think it's important, and I will keep fighting for for it being important, because as we've been discussing now for many weeks on this show, you have we're coming up to some kind of society shutdown, for lack of food and water and stuff, in quite a few, not so many years from now, and various different groups who care about ecology and stuff have kind of got the knife to their throat about should they go on an all-out revolution, or death fight for nature now, or should they just stand by and watch society collapse, in order for the rest of the living planets to sort of bounce back after the collapse. And I think a quite rational conclusion after listening to many years of Manga Bay weekly roundups is that nope, humans are not going to ever stop destroying forests and oceans and animal populations and stuff. This is just who we are. So as long as we have this extra energy that we get from not only eating but also extracting energy. I think somebody made the point over the last week that all the other animals and plants, they just get energy from what they eat. But we humans, we are not satisfied with just eating and getting energy. We want to have like 80 times that energy that we eat. We want to transport us and heat our houses and move us about and stuff. Yeah, so this is just who we are as a species. This is what the civilized society does. It does destroy all of these things, and the only way that destruction can stop is if the industrial society stops. That's pretty clear from Sam Mitchell's reading of Manga Bay, anyway, the way I see it. So that is the point of doing something like that. I will always say that finding the truth and telling the truth is important. You may not understand yourself if you're the one spreading the truth. You may not understand yourself why it's important, or who the fuck is going to ever use that truth for anything good. But somebody on the planet out of 8 billion people will find a way to use the truth for some kind of good, I think.
But when you get, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I had a question.
I had quite a bit to say, Sophie. Do you want to get your bit in first?
I just well, obviously, if you have a bit to say, I'll just very shortly, and we can keep that question for later on. Because when I listen to Going South, and I totally agree with what he's saying on the civilization and that's and us humans with our need. But the question is it because we have lost? It comes back to the same thing. It's because we have lost our connection with our ecosystem, with our world around us, that we have come to civilization. So we're back again at the same thing. We're saying it's civilization, that's the industrial civilization, that's the culprit, but behind it, it's our disconnection again. We come again back to not a spiritual, more than a spiritual, more than a disconnect, a break that Lord Hugh called the alien cortex. And so we're always going back to the same thing. That's.
Can I just address Torstein and then come back to you, Sophie? Which is what Torstein was just saying about energy is very interesting, because what is left out of all the current discourses about any kind of energy, we're going to save everything, ourselves and the planet and everything else, by having renewable energy, or free energy, or sustainable energy, or any kind of energy that's not fossil fuel energy, whatever you like, pick whichever one you want, completely ignores the main issue, which Torstein really touched upon, which is energy is this great lever which we have over everything else. It multiplies everything we do. It multiplies the effect of it so hugely. That the energy that we can expend each human being can expend is always much more than that human being's personal individual energy. And so we have an energy problem at a very basic level of just simply the fact that we're using it, regardless of how it is using external energy. I mean, regardless of how it's obtained and whether or not that is harmful in itself as a separate issue, almost doesn't matter in a way. I wanted to make a remark about, what you said about activists waiting for collapse, and that the damaging thing is industrial civilization, and also thinking of Sam in his he had a discussion once with Derek Jensen, and I think they more or less came to the conclusion in their discussion that of course that the global industrial civilization is the elephant in the room. And then I think Sam put up the objection and said, look, he said, yeah, sure, okay, so you shut down the means of industrial agriculture and all the rest of it. Well, the first thing that people are going to do is just go rampaging across the natural environment and completely wipe it clean in desperation to get food directly from the natural environment during that bottleneck period between the end of industrial support and the beginning of everybody, of course, dying out, and that so there would be this kind of last minute decimation of the natural world, because everybody would suddenly go out and hunt, and the natural world is already natural reserves of food source are going to be very rapidly depleted. And I remember that particular talk because afterwards, Derek got back to Sam and said, hey, can we do another talk for another 15 minutes or something? Because I want to answer that question in detail. And Derek's thing was that, well, no, he said, we probably won't cause as much damage to the natural environment in our dying moments as you might think, because we won't have the energy to get to a lot of the places. He sort of gave the example of like, we're not going to be able to go trawler fishing in the middle of the Pacific Ocean because we simply won't have a boat, we won't have the fuel for a boat to get there. So there'll be lots of natural reserves of the natural environment which will survive. But it was still an interesting point to bear in mind that, whilst the natural world may, in the long term, it'll end up being better without civilization. It may face a sort of bottleneck of increased direct exploitation as civilization goes down.
Yeah, but then you have to compare that 1 week that you are talking about now with 10,000 years of agriculture and industrial life. So yeah, and now also it's not like some politicians is presenting a choice. Do you want to take the collapse road or lasting civilization road? Collapse doesn't work like that. Society just collapses. So it's not like you have to weigh. Yeah, but what if people go out and hunt and cut forest and stuff? Maybe we should cancel your collapse plan. That's not the discussion we're having, is it?
Oh no, I don't think it was being used in the sense that we should therefore not either encourage collapse or try to present it happening. It was simply just running through the scenario of once collapse starts or goes ahead, it might not look as good, at least initially, as people would like it to in terms of the regeneration of the natural environment. I think, as you say, the time scale, sure, once we're gone or once we're cut down to a reasonable size, the natural world is going to have a lot of time on it to rebuild. I think, sure, kind of depends, though, things that have become extinct, looking at an extremely long life, extremely long time span before, you start recovering diversity once you've got important species that just aren't here anymore. Did you want to say something, Torstein? Otherwise, I just want to go back and address Sophie.
Yeah. I think maybe the most important. Let's say that you do get a week or a month or something with a very hard attack on the remaining nature. What you will do during that month will be to decimate the numbers of the different species. The numbers of trees and the numbers of deer or elk or moose or whatever. What you won't do is totally eradicate species within a month just by going, as you say, commando without a car, without a trawler or anything. So just the sort of scaling down of population numbers during that crazy month won't be that serious, because that will just bounce back within a year or two, like populations do, like mice and birds that hunt mice and stuff. They bounce back in a very short time. So I don't think that is such a big concern.
Well, it all depends on the season it happens and the environment where you are too. Like if urban or not, if it happens in the winter or if it happens in the summer, if there is growth, it's where you are geographically. Are you in a mountain? Are you near the sea? We can't make a general statement about the impact that we would have around us if we went hungry and had to go on a rampage. We're not locusts. I was posting there. Well, I just wrote there that during the Irish famine, when the potatoes disappeared, people were already weakened by difficult lives and poverty, so they couldn't go anywhere to find stuff. They didn't. They were they just died like that because they died of weakness, disease, and but they had food if they could have got to it. There was other routes, and there was also a lot of people who had forgotten about what they could use foraging because they were enslaved for too long and their culture had been destroyed. The people near the shore, they knew about the shells and the seaweed and the islands. Some of them survived because of that, but a lot of people didn't know about it and couldn't get there because they were too weak. So that's what happens, you know.
Yeah, that's a very key point about energy also, because yeah, I can't really say I have first-hand experience, but almost first-hand, because sometimes when you go trout fishing in the mountains, because your fridge is empty, you don't have anything to eat in your fridge, and there's not coming anything there for a while, for a week or so, and then your hunger can sort of be a force when you go to the river to catch trout, because it's like you have to catch. And I even told the river, and told the trout that I have to kill you because I need your proteins or whatever. uh, but you don't have to go very many days without any food before you have an acute energy problem where you can't get any new food because you haven't eaten in a week. I think that's a big buffer for post-civilized humans. That if you really get down to having gone a week without any food and maybe not even clean water, then you have really low energy levels for creatively hunting or creatively catching anything animal food anyway. Plants are of course easier, and you can, if you know about 10-20 different species that live in a forest area, you can just go for those and just go around grazing or eating these leaves or clovers or whatever all day.
I wanted to go back to just address something Sophie said a few minutes ago about the destructive power of civilization. This is a kind of a system that we've set up, which at other times we've called the machine and Moloch and all this kind of thing in these discussions. And during the week, both Sophie and I were listening to a couple of very interesting discussions between Brett Weinstein and Freddie Sayers in one of them, and Brett Weinstein and Neil Oliver in the other discussion. One of the things that was brought up there, I think brought up in the discussion by Weinstein, was because he's an evolutionary biologist, and he didn't actually expand on this point to any great extent, unfortunately. But what he did say was he looked at the systems that we set up. I think he was talking in this case specifically about the way Big Pharma operates in terms of having become a sort of self-sustaining, self-serving, self-promoting organism in its own right. That the corporate system that they have is now really an organism. And it evolves he can see that as an evolutionary biologist, he could see that it was evolving and operating in ways that you would expect an organic organism to do. And what he was, I think what he was pointing out is it then has an agenda of its own once you've set up these large-scale systems. And the agenda of these systems is then, even though human beings have caused it to come into existence, they no longer control it, that it has a life of its own. And not only that, but human beings are not always clear on what the agenda of this system is and where it's likely to take them. And I think I was just thinking about those points when Sophie was talking about, industrial civilization. Is that is what we've done? This is the mega system. All of the smaller systems within it might be corporate entities, such as the pharmaceutical industry or the military industrial complex and all these subsystems in it. But as a totality, we've set up this kind of global industrial civilization, this massive thing that we can no longer control. I guess this links back to where we started off at the beginning about this question of human agency, is that now that human agency has created these things, these entities, they now are the ones that have agency, but it's not under our control. And so this question of agency, and I think as part of the question of agency, I think also to me, I get this lingering feeling of guilt associated with it. Is oh, what's wrong with us? Why don't we do anything? We're such horrible beings, why can't we do the right thing? Why are we so reprehensible and behave so badly? And yeah, sure. I mean, that's certainly true in many ways, but there seems to be more to the story, because within this collective of apparently horrible beings, there's a lot of really well-meaning ones, such as the people on Monga Bay, for instance. But also our agency is, even if we had it, how good is it going to be now in the face of these sort of mega organisms that we've created, which are like our Frankensteins, that we've created these things and breathed life into them, and then they're going off by themselves. So they're just some thoughts that I just had as a result of what Sophie said. I don't know if any. Go on.
I don't agree with that at all. That's like too easy to just blame the system that we're living in. It's like Lord Yu used to say that he went through collapse already because South Africa, the system he grew up in South Africa, collapsed during his lifetime. And that system was called apartheid, and especially the Swedes and the Scandinavians led the boycotts of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And what we're going through now is kind of the same system collapse, because we have decided that the best species in the universe is human beings, and all the other plants and animals are have less worth than us. And so we will get a really hard reality check when our system collapses and we go down in the mud with the rest of the species, and we discover that, oh, we're not we're not very different. We're just some blubber lying here in the mud with the rest of them. So you're kind of blaming, if we if we accept the parallel to apartheid to civilized society, you're kind of blaming apartheid and saying that we us white folks in South Africa, we can't do anything. It's the apartheid. The apartheid is running things now. It's not us people doing it. So I find that irresponsible in a way, and also it's the part of agency that that we really have been discussing for for a few weeks is the debate that is on all the climate twitters and all the climate discussions all over the planet, whether or not we can actually do anything to stop climate collapsing the civilized society. And everybody who has a paycheck in climate science say that we certainly do have agency, and everybody who used to get a paycheck or is just an activist, citizen activist, say that no, this ship sailed 50 years ago, and so we don't have agency. So that's kind of where the discussion stands. And I think the point that Bob made last week on this call was to say that if we don't have agency, and our parents' generation didn't have agency because we were already past the tipping point back when they were kids, our parents' generation were kids, then it's not rational to go around with a lot of guilt, because what should we do? We couldn't do anything 30 years before we were born. That's not physically possible. So yeah, we can take on sort of a species level guilt, and we can also figure out that it was this kind of civilized life that ruined everything. But that also wasn't our invention, you and me. We didn't, me and Gary didn't invent human civilization or industry. And to Sophie, I think you said something about going back to the split and to the alien cortex and the start of that. That is also almost a synonym for civilization, because civilization means city life, right? And the whole point of an early city was to have a wall between where people lived and there you had nature, right? So in a sense, the alien cortex is kind of that idea of living apart from nature. There you have the word apart, so you have apartheid again. So the whole thing is kind of sociopathic and deeply racist with apartheid and keeping things separate, keeping the god species for itself and nature outside of the walls.
I really appreciate your answer there to everything. There's one thing though, I don't think when I was listening to Gary, there was an idea of blame on the machine, because I don't think you just dismiss human agency and say, oh, it's our creation, it's gone, But what I think what Gary was saying is that machine, and that's what DB is writing on the comments that he, after William Blake, that the video on William Blake that was posted on the subreddit, is that this kind of monster, alien cortex, Urizen, whatever it is, and it is at the core of this monster that's ruling our world at the moment, is that its characteristic is that it's self-destructive and it's turning on itself. And our agency in there is not say, well, we can't blame and say it's fault, we're humans, poor humans, we've done it, and now our creation is killing us. It's not that. It's just that we're witnessing a thing that's eating its tail, and that is it's bringing us to our demise. I don't know where our agency stands there, except at a level of at a spiritual level and at an acceptance level and at a catharsis level, but at a grieving level. But other than that, I don't see any other position we can have.
But the discussion last week was about, why is Europe doing this, and the European Union is running itself into the ground, and they're collapsing their own economy. And then you were going on about this is kind of a self-regulating machine and blah blah blah. And I tried to point out that there is a country called the United States of America, which is at the head of the NATO alliance, which is not really an alliance. It's one leading nation and 30 slaves who are just told what to do. So instead of kind of talking about having a runaway society that does what it as an entity wants, I think we should remember that we have a US empire in this world, and it has like something like 400 military bases all over the planet, and let's not just give them a free card to do whatever they want. Let's call it by the real name, USA. Okay, I'm not condemning USA or anything. I'm just saying they are pulling the strings of all of these slave nations. Maybe USA is a good force or a bad force in the world. I'm not currently talking about that. I'm just saying that they are a real entity, and we see American politicians on TV and the internet every fucking day. So let's not fool ourselves and say that this is a techno utopian entity that is run amok. It's USA. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably become a bit circular, I think, in the USA, where the voices that we hear and what their media pumps out is very much also the creation of the sort of mega machine that they've set up. The voices. This is going back. Again, I'm reminded of the Weinstein discussion where he talked about one of his major complaints. He was basically, his discussion was about the coronavirus thing, but it's applicable here, I think. In his, one of his major complaints was that all of our institutions have become completely captured by a sort of allowable narrative, which is fairly narrow, and which basically is the same general thing as you find the large corporate viewpoint, or the sort of empire narratives that attitude that places like the United States have. And so, of course, any voices that come out of that are basically not really independent human voices with any particular influence of their own. They're just they're just mouthing the script of the machine, kind of thing. I just wanted to go back just where you said that I was blaming the system, and no, I'm not trying to shift blame, and it's why I brought up this question of a feeling of guilt, because I think the existence of a feeling of a certain guilt as a human being is, to some degree, I'm contributing to this. I may not have knowingly done it. I may not be able to even avoid continuing to do it. But to some extent, everybody is either deliberately or not deliberately contributing to this. And so, there's if you're honest with yourself, I suppose there is a bit of a feeling of culpability there. And I mean, just personally, I'm not trying to shift any of my personal feelings onto some separate faceless entity, you know. But I can see your point there. I mean, it's obviously not constructive to just say, oh well, it's got nothing to do with us. It's all this mega machine thing, completely out of my hands. I'm okay. I'm lily white, and some other force is going to have to act. And as Sophie said, and of course as we said last week, maybe that other force is acting too, in terms of the whole industrial thing, civilization having become so insanely overdeveloped. It's like one of these extreme muscle building people who have got their bodies into such a condition that they can't even bend over or move, because they've taken their pursuit to such a ridiculous extreme. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that for a minute.
Yes, thanks, Gary. So this carrying of guilt is not productive in any way, and it stops you from being active. It's actually against. I don't know. It brings back again the question of agency. Yeah, I don't think the species guilt is lead. I think it leads you to a cul-de-sac. It leads you to a trap. As Going South was saying, like we were only we were born into something that was already happening. We have absolutely no take in what has happened. So it's an interesting intellectual and discussion thing to do to put point of view, but you don't want to go in that direction. Otherwise, you end up in this suicidal kind of cynical. We're nothing. Human beings are a parasite. I mean, all this sort of views, and actually, that's where I'd like to go back to, because we're going to be talking to George, who's saying that a thing like human beings are the only species that have absolutely no ecological role. We touched that in our last meeting when we talked about human consciousness, and are we just here to be witnesses to this beautiful world? And I'd like to just maybe go back there if anybody has something to say on this.
Well, I suppose just to begin it, if he's asserting that we have no ecological role, then I suppose it's implied in what he's saying that nature has made a mistake and that we shouldn't have been here. And I don't know, does that just spark anything in you? Has nature made a mistake? Are we in error? Should in fact we have died out or not been here, like some kind of genetic modification that turned out a strange creature that didn't have a mouth and couldn't live? I mean, are we in that category or not?
Who are we to say that nature can make a mistake? Like, we are part of nature, so it's just, yeah, exactly. Like, I don't understand even the word mistake in the context of the natural world. There is no mistakes. There can't be a mistake.
Well, that's what I would have said. I didn't. What I would have preferred to have said was that George is implying that God is fallible, but I didn't want to put it in those quite that way. Because it just sounds a bit grandiose to say that God doesn't make mistakes. But given given that we are here and it probably isn't a mistake, I suppose the next thing is, well, it was the supposedly evolutionary process that led to the formation of our strange psychology, is that also natural? You know, and even the concrete and glass world, which even human beings call not the natural world. Um, I don't know. I mean, is it just too extreme to say that like even if it is unnatural, if we went back and reran the experiment, there's probably a good chance that we repeat it and end up back here where we are. Um, so a kind of a natural progression would occur anyway. So I suppose we're looking at a question of where do we draw the line between what's natural and what's not, or is everything natural, including us and all our amazing dysfunctional creations? I don't know. Do we want to stop with that question? You got a thought about that?
I think the way I see it, when we came to the city wall and the civilized life within the town or village or whatever, then started a new kind of cultural evolution in humans, where the traits that we now know and hate were promoted by city life, like being sneaky, or being a criminal, or being a tyrant, and being a good soldier and killing a lot of people. So I think maybe what we are referring to as the alien cortex is something that was quite small eventually, in the beginning, but then eventually became a huge part of what humanity is today, or what humans are today, because now we kind of thinking in a civilized system sense, and we talk about how can me or my group get ahead in this rat race, and so what do you think about that as a origin of the alien cortex?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not arguing with it, but actually, just while you were talking, something came to mind, which is that, hang on, I just got to try and kind of recover it. That because how Lord Hugh spoke about transhumanism, and he covered that in different ways, not just in terms of bionic arms and neural implants, but also in terms of people getting transgender modifications and all that. But the thought that just struck me while you were talking was that the alien cortex could have been our first transhuman creation. Almost unwittingly, we created this sort of phantom self within ourselves that isn't really, you could argue, is not really human, because it seems to be hostile to our best interests in a lot of ways. And so, with the cultural, the movement, as you were saying, into gradually, more civilized environment, civilized. I don't mean civilized, civilization environment. That led to fortuitous circumstances for an invasive species to take over. Suddenly an alien cortex could take root in the vegetable patch and begin to smother everything. So it's sorry. I suppose I'm not really commenting directly on what you said, but it just occurred to me that the alien cortex might be our sort of transhuman creation that we have to note what we've done there within ourselves, you know.
I don't really subscribe to that completely, what you say about the transhumanist creation. I think we can't go back. We had this little piece of brain that differentiates from our cousins, apes, and it's a gift of nature. It didn't come from, I mean, it was not a monstrous creation. It came from nature. I think it's the way we used it that operated the horrors. It was the lack of mastering it, and it became the ruler of our behaviors and our ways of thinking. But when we used it wisely, and when we discovered fire, and we thought that we could, shape a few stones to scrape skins to keep us warm, because we hadn't as many hair as the animals around us, and we were ingenious in certain ways, but I don't know if we were wise already, or if we'd already started to let the alien cortex run amok. But I think it's a